Welcome back, everybody. Special guest, Bob Seggerson, absolutely great coach at the high school level in Ohio, former teammate of mine, won 518 games in his career. It's in the Hall of Fame, the Ohio Basketball Hall of Fame. Bob, before we took the break, we were talking about kids concentrating on one sport early and et cetera. And one of the things that does happen to those kids that do that is some of them actually get to the point where they're scholarship worthy. And I know about recruiting from the college side, but what's it like from the high school side when you've got a good player? What I want you to talk about is those players that think maybe they're a little bit better than they are, the parents, how they get involved, and then how you deal with the college coaches also and telling them what level this kid is in your mind.
Well, first of all, every kid's better than he is not as good as they think they are. And every athlete's parents think they're better than they are. I mean, that just comes with the territory. I mean, it just is. And I got to the point where I didn't get mad at them. I just would try to, reason with them. But I think every athlete aspires to be a Division I player. So you will get a kid who's like a junior in high school, and you'll sit him down in the spring, and he's a good player. He maybe has a chance to at a Division II, maybe, but is probably a Division III NCAA or a non-scholarship player that will get the chance to play at the next level if he wants to. And you'll ask him, okay, what are you thinking? And they'll go, well, I'm still like Ohio State and Michigan. And it's amazing how many times I've had conversation with young athletes, and they're still dreaming that's going to happen. Now, one thing AAU has done is it's been more selective, and so to make some of these travel teams that really do get exposure, you have to be pretty good. The problem comes to more so is when you get a parent who just is absolutely convinced that their son or daughter is a Division I athlete or a Division II scholarship athlete, and they're not. And so I've had to sit parents down and when they're talking to them and say, this is how you're going to find out if Billy is a Division I athlete. They're going to offer him. It's not me going out and knocking on their door and begging, asking them to get a scholarship, because nobody's hidden anymore. There's diamond in the rough is just not really much of a factor anymore. But when they start coming, there's a kid that I know in this area right now that is a great player, and everybody thinks, well, he's averaging 30 points a game, he's going to go D1. And I saw his father at a game and talked to him, and he goes, well, what do you think, Seg? And I says, well, it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what the Division I coaching staffs think. And if they think that he can play Division I basketball, that you will know this before your senior year. You will know it in the springtime and summer and at the very latest in the fall, where they'll be coming in with scholarship offers. And if they're not, if the D1s aren't there, then beware, because what could happen is very late in the recruiting cycle, they may not get who they want. And then they come back to recruit you. And you think, oh, yeah, I'm going to get this D1 scholarship. Well, guess what? You're going to be on the end of the bench because you weren't who they really wanted in the first place. Mm-hmm. And you could end up not playing. And I've seen that happen to a lot of good athletes, and several at Lima Central Catholic who were just determined to be D1 athletes, and late in the recruiting cycle got onto a D1 program, but when it was all over, wished that they had gone to D2 and had a great career there, instead of sitting on somebody's bench at the level up. So it's a tough thing to sell to a kid, and it's a hard thing to tell a parent, but I used to pass it on. They'd want me to do something, and I'd say, it's not up to me. It's up to the Division I and Division II scholarship programs. They will tell you if your son or daughter is worth getting, is going to get us. If they're not there, they're not there. I can't talk them into it at the last second. Yeah. So it's tough. It's a tough thing. It's a tough thing for those athletes, but it's, and they got to take advantage of the scholarship when they do get them, because all these kids aren't going to go pro. And you've been there. There's an enormous number of college kids playing Division I and Division II scholarship basketball who really think they're going to play professional ball in the G League or Europe. I mean, a ton of them. And I go back to 5-star when there was a basketball coach at Washington named George Raveling. I think he coached at Iowa for a while too.
Yeah, he did.
He spoke to 5-star one time. He was great. He walked out on that court, in front of all these Division I, Division II scholarship players. There's like 300 of them in the gym. And he had this basketball and he had these massive hands, and he pulls out this air nozzle and he sticks it into the basketball, and then he squeezed it until there was no air in the basketball. And then he just dropped it to the floor. And he said, "Don't waste basketball." That was his say. Don't waste it. He says, because I got news for you. You aren't playing professional ball. You're not going to play most of you are not going to play. It's a good dream. Work for that. He said, but if you waste your scholarship and end up in some goofy major that is not going to support you or your family, then you've wasted scholarship. If you're sitting there thinking you're going to knock down a division, an NBA salary for 5 or 10 years, you're just kidding yourself. Because even those of you in this room right now who are McDonald's All-Americans and who are, being recruited at the top level, most of you won't go to the next level. So it was a really good message to athletes about not wasting the opportunity they have and to get an education while they're playing basketball. And if they get sucked into one of these majors that all these colleges have now that really won't get you a job, you say you're wasting basketball. And to me, there was another side to that argument too that I used to use with my players, is that even if you're not a scholarship basketball player, even if you're a guy that just sits on the end of the bench, don't waste basketball by not realizing that you can get as much out of the game as a scholarship player or the star on the team. If you're part of a team, if you're practicing with them, you can still learn the same, you can learn camaraderie, you can learn friendship, you can learn resiliency, you can learn discipline, you can learn toughness, things that you can use in your life. Don't quit the team or drop out because you didn't get picked for a select team when you were in the 7th or 8th grade, or that you're not in the playing role, or some sophomore got in front of you. Stay with basketball. Don't waste the opportunity to get the real rewards of basketball, which are not scholarship money. The purpose of basketball is not to get kids to get scholarships. The purpose is to be part of something bigger than yourself. Yeah. And if that means that you have to play a role that's a little bit under what you imagine or your parents did, you can still get the rewards of basketball. Don't waste the opportunity that basketball gives you. And that speech that Raveling made, it really stuck with me. And I've tried to impart that. That's kind of the message that I try to give players in our program. And, when I speak at clinics and things like that, I think that's an important message for young people to hear.
Yeah, I agree. Going back to your philosophy on, I want to talk about scheduling. In my book, I talk about our non-conference schedule. And this may have come from the father, her, and us, or that when I scheduled, I always tried to have a non-conference schedule that was extremely difficult. And so we were being at the bottom of the rung. We could go and play Division II NCAA schools and they'd pay us a little bit of money to come play them, $500 or so. But if you played 6 or 7 of them, then you had, maybe up to $5,000 that you could put into your budget and be able to use to do a little more in your program. But you almost guaranteed yourself of going 0-6 or 0-7 on your non-conference. What was your philosophy on your non-conference scheduling? Well,
my philosophy was just like yours, Joe. I wanted to play as tough as we could get. Now, Lima Central Catholic we were not in the league for almost the entire time that I coached, and even to this day, we didn't get in the league. So what we tried to do is we tried to play the top of the 3 or 4 leagues around the area. So, and that meant playing schools that are bigger than us quite a bit. It prepared us for the post-game season tournament, and that's where we had our eyes because we didn't play for a league championship. And so we weren't really worried about, having a record with 5 or 6 losses on it because we were still going to get in. Everybody got into the postseason tournament. And oftentimes through the first 2 levels of the tournament, especially, we were playing teams that weren't really as good as the teams that we were playing during our normal schedule. And so we would have teams that were going, deep into the tournament who had, just over 500 or, something like that. So I did feel like I was more interested in, you can get more out of a loss than you to a tough team as long as you're not getting hammered. And then you could by stepping on some, some team that is not really that good. I did tell several coaches that were taking over programs that were really bad. And I told them, I advised them that early on, maybe the first year or 2, schedule some wins. I mean, get some wins under your belt. Don't, let your they're going to give you 3 years. They should give them 5 years, but you're going to get some time to build your program. So go in and build your program from the bottom up, always from the middle. This is high school. So junior high up, build from there. And then in that meantime, get some wins, because it's really hard to turn a program around that hasn't had wins because it becomes so much a part of the psychological culture that they're in that the expectation, especially when games get close, is that you're going to lose. And that's a real hard thing to turn around in a program's head, I think. Joe, we used to see this ourselves. We built a great program, and I can't tell you how many times we played a team that we were supposed to win, but late in the game, it's a great game. And it came down to crunch time. And instead of us making a great play, the other team would make a play and a series of plays that put him in a bad position, and we could win the game. You know what I mean? It was like they didn't believe it in the back of their heads that they could pull this win off. And I can't tell you how many times I've been on the other side of that, where we were the beneficiary of that simply because we had that reputation and we were a strong program. And I always felt bad for those coaches because I thought to myself, that coach worked hard enough to win that game, but his players, they just don't believe it yet, and getting them to go from there to a winning mentality is probably the biggest challenge a coach faces. And I think you faced that, Joe. I think you faced that at Benedictine.
Yeah, I really did. When I took over, the year before I took over, they were 0-18 in the league, 5-26. And that next year with the same team, I tell people all the time, I said, the good news is I had all 5 starters back. The bad news is I had all 5 starters back. Yeah. And mentally, they just didn't know how to win. And right. It took me that year, we were 3-8 out of the box. And one day in practice, I just got them in the huddle and I said, gentlemen, I want you to know I never, ever, 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 ever quit. And neither are you. And I'll be doggone. We ended up 17-17 in the playoffs, the league playoffs. We had to go down and play the second place team, and we beat them on their home court. And we had a chance to win and playing the third place team in the semifinals, and lost it right at the end. But changing that mindset, Bobby, was so difficult. And it actually took me about 4 years, almost 5 years, before I had that driven out of their heads. Yeah. And it was one of my biggest challenges. So,
Joe, I remember my first, when I took over the program had not necessarily been really down, but they were underperforming for a number of years. And, it wasn't where it should have been. And I remember early in my coaching career, after a loss, like a second or third, fourth game, taking the kids into the locker room, and they were okay with it. You know what I mean? It wasn't, I remember I sat them all down. I got all the assistants out, and I said, and I had it out with them. I said, I want you to know something. I'm hurting right now. Yeah. I am really hurting, and it bothers me that you're not hurting. And I mean, I really emotionally went after him a little bit and told him how I felt about it. And if they were going to play for me, that they had to have at least as much feeling for this game as I did, because there's no worse feeling in the game of basketball than when a coach realizes that he wants to win more than his players. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And that's and changing that, it can be done. And I think we did it. You know, I think I got a couple kids in there that night that felt exactly like I did. And then you start rubbing that off and you start getting players over time that are in a successful program. Then it kind of takes care of itself. Your players take care of the locker room.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I
that's
still
right.
remember that night I went in there and told them that.
Let me change topics on you. You're a journalist. Sister Paulette would never, ever believe that I wrote a book and you write a weekly column for the newspaper. And when we were in that English class, and I think we were in separate English classes, I was actually the class clown in the one I was in. And I don't know how well you did in English, but the last thing she would have ever expected is, at least for me, to be a writer of any sort. But I've read your articles, and you've been doing it for years, and they're just excellent, in my opinion. How'd that happen?
Well, you know, I always liked to write. When I was in high school, I actually went into we did have a creative writing class by Rita K. Blanchard taught. There was about 12 of us in this class my senior year, and I would never have gone into that class, you know, unless Jim Lynch, 4 years before me, had done that and done some poetry, written some poetry for the school newsletter. And I remember thinking, well, that was kind of cool. And so that kind of gave me, the jock, permission to kind of go in that direction a little bit. So I like to write, and I always felt like I had a gift for it. I almost went into journalism in college, but I loved history and I thought about law and that. So, but I didn't do it. So where I learned to write, Joe, was when I was a director of guidance. I had to write these recommendations to select schools, and I had to present a student in a light, you know, and try to build them up some way in a creative way. And that's really where I learned to write. But when I retired from coaching, Jim Crummel's the editor of the Lima News, circulation, I don't know, 30 or 40,000. He asked me if I would write one column to start the next season, you know, because I was out of it for the first time. I said, yeah, I'll do one. Well, I got a good reaction, so I did another one, and I ended up writing one every week that year. And that turned into 10, this is my 11th year now. And I write them during the basketball season, and a lot of them are just, you know, off the cuff, history, how I feel, coaching. And I like it because it keeps my foot in the game. And you know, it's like it's not as hard to give up basketball because I'm still in it, because I'm writing about it. And the column has been well received around the state and even farther out. I mean, I'm amazed in this day of social media how I'll write a column and I'll get a reply, and I get a lot of emails and text and things. I'll get them from literally all around the country. I mean, I don't get deluged with them, but certain columns will hit a nerve, and people will write to me, and I'm amazed at how many people end up reading the column. But I like it. It's work, but it's work that I like to do.
Well, you're really good at it, and I'm so glad that you posted on Facebook, because I necessarily would not go out and go to the Lima News and click
Sure.
on that and go look for the article. But boy, when it's on Facebook, it's just, oh, Bobby wrote another one. Great. Click on it, and they're always very interesting and entertaining. So you do a great job. One of the things that I did find out there was this 50 things learned as a high school coach that you put together, which has so many great things in it, things that you did learn. And I'm going to ask you online right now, may I have permission to take that and put that on my website as a resource for coaches?
Yeah, absolutely. 50 lessons I learned. They're just a sentence, 50 sentences. So it's not like you can read through it in about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, very easily. But some of them are tongue in cheek. And that was one of the columns that really, really got around. I mean, it just went around, and it just didn't stop going around for quite a long time. So I think a lot of people out there that are coaches may have seen it, but it's just something that I started thinking about one night, and I got up to 50 and I said, "I'm gonna stop right there." But I enjoyed that. I enjoyed writing that column. That was one of my favorite ones.
Oh, you did a great job, and maybe we can get this thing going again, because it's something that coaches, young coaches especially, I think they get a lot out of it. So I'd really like to put it out on my website and
Absolutely.
let people tap into it. So,
Absolutely.
well, Bob, I'm just thrilled that you joined me for. We've been visiting for a while here. It's been great talking to you. We've been friends for a long time, and I know when I get back to Lima, we usually get together, but never have an opportunity to really talk at length. You know, it's usually at some type of a function. But I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us and share your knowledge and your wisdom with our listeners. Is there any last words you might have that you'd want to give advice to any of our young coaches that are watching, or whoever?
The advice I give to all young coaches is don't try to be your high school coach, and don't try to be your college coach, and don't try to be, some professional coach you've admired your whole career. Be you, be the person that you are, tap into the passion that brought you to the game in the first place and use that. And that is usually going to be enough, because people who are attracted to coaches, the coaching business, are usually sacrificing something in the effort. And if you're going to do that, you don't want to look back at someday and say, "Oh, I wish I'd have done it my way and hadn't done it." Be yourself. The other thing I would say is, I remember in high school when you came to Lima Central Catholic, Joe, and you were like 5'7" and weighed like I don't know, 120 pounds maybe. You were like you were just like this real little guy, and you could shoot it. You came from Ottawa, so I didn't. And I remember in practices, you could shoot it, but you were just so frail. And then all of a sudden, like in one summer, you came back and you just like grew into yourself. And that's kind of like what coaching does. I mean, with young coaches, you get in the game and you feel out of sorts, and you question yourself, especially if you've taken a good job or a high school job when you're maybe not ready for it, you're young, and but you grow into it. I mean, you grow into coaching. If you were meant to be a coaching, it will work for you. You just have to stay with it. It will come.
Oh, that's great. Well, appreciate the advice. And Bob, thank you so much for joining me.
Okay,
Look forward
Joe.
to seeing you when I come back to Lima. I need to get back there soon. It's been a while since the virus has hit, so
Yeah.
we get back and see you and Janie and lie about our past, about how good of players we were.
Everybody does that.
Yeah. Thanks, Bobby.
All right, Joe. I appreciate it. I loved every minute of it.
Okay. You take care.
You too.